Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Smart Legal Contracts, Optimize or Disrupt for this webinar on May 1st, 2018, brought to you by Clause Connected Contracting. Just so everyone knows on the call that we will be recording it, so please use your discretion if that's an issue for you. My name is Houman Shadab, the Chief Executive Officer of Clause, and I'm pleased to introduce my colleagues that will be presenting on our webinar today. They are Peter Hun, the Chief Product Officer of Clause, Dan Selman, Chief Technology Officer, and Matt Roberts, Integration Lead. We will be having these webinars on the first Tuesday of every month, and we will include a series of polls in the webinars as well. So we will start out our webinar today with a background poll on the attendees to get an idea of your expertise and so how we can properly tailor the presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and launch our first poll, which you should be able to see on your screen now, asking you generally, what is your background in terms of law, technology, or other? Okay, just a few more seconds here, and we will end the poll and show the results. So you should be able to see on your screen that just over a majority of the attendees have a legal background. 41% have a technology and 9% have others. And I suspect some of you fall into more than one category. Excellent. So I will go ahead now and pass the presentation to my colleague, Peter Hun.
Thank you, Houman. So welcome everybody to today's webinar. We're going to briefly run through the agenda for today, which will consist of an introduction to Clause and the concept of connected contracting. We'll then jump into an overview of the core project, and we'll include a live demo. We reserve time at the end of the today's session so that participants can ask questions and provide answers. So we're going to briefly jump into problems in commercial contracting. So as a lawyer, as many of you are, I've experienced many of the problems of commercial contract management. As every lawyer and contract manager knows, CLM is an incredibly inefficient process. It's very manual, very paper-based, consists of a variety of systems that need to be reconciled. So we have PDFs that contain key terms and conditions, dates, IT systems that monitor and provide data that relate to those terms and conditions. It's very error-prone, time-consuming process. A lot of admin that needs to occur, emails to accounting, for example. A lot of revenue is lost in that process. This is all because of a lack of real-time state. Users cannot see the state of their current contracts and have to perform intensive processes that are very admin intensive to monitor those contracts. So if we extrapolate this over the Fortune 500, for example, that's about $1 trillion problem. 9% of all annual revenue is lost as a result of this very intensive manual process. The reason for that is contracts don't have real-time state, and contracts cannot connect to the enterprise systems that firms use to manage their enterprise and their infrastructure. So we're going to briefly jump into another poll now to assess contract management pain points.
And so here we have the second poll for contract management pain points, and we are asking you, so what are the biggest issues you've had with managing, automating, or enforcing your contracts? We have several answers there. You should be able to see on your screen, and please take about a minute to go ahead and answer the poll questions here. Thank you. Okay, we will be ending our poll in about 15 seconds. For those of you who haven't had a chance to answer, please go ahead and do so. Excellent, thank you for participating. Looks like we have a wide variety of issues when it comes to contracting, and the biggest problem, or the winner, if you will, just by a hair, is divergence between the terms of the contracts and the underlying information technology systems. The second biggest problem with contracting are monitoring KPIs, key performance indicators, and as you can all see as well, a couple of the other larger problems are keeping track of commitments, perhaps in real time, as well as staff turnover causing institutional amnesia, so passing along knowledge within a company. Very interesting and results that we will continue to discuss in today's webinar as well. And again, feel free to go ahead and include any comments or questions in the chat panel as we go along here as well. So now we'll turn it over to Dan Selman.
Thanks, Hooman. Yeah, fascinating poll, and that's, you know, for us who work in connected contracting, that's really reassuring to see that divergence between contract terms and IT systems came out as the perceived #1 issue, because that's really the essence of what we're all about at Clause, is, you know, bringing the IT community together with the legal community and building a platform that allows them to, you know, to both collaborate and operationalize contracts. So to make that a bit more concrete, let me just describe a couple of recent projects that we've done with some companies, interesting companies, around this notion of connected contracting. So the first one was a fascinating use case where we tracked a shipment of coconut sugar from Java to Rotterdam. So this is a traditional shipping container. The coconut sugar was shipped with a data logger that captures the temperature and the humidity of the shipment during transit. And then what we did was we took the temperature and humidity data from the data logger, and we essentially fed it through a smart legal contract. And that smart legal contract calculated some penalties or the cost of the shipment based on the conditions of carriage. And this was a proof of concept that we could process that real IoT data from the shipment and successfully store it on a blockchain and then route it through a legally enforceable contract. So we've written up that use case on our blog, so feel free to check that out. The second use case, just to give you kind of a flavor of the breadth of applicability of this technology, was with Bosch. So we were very fortunate to present this use case at Bosch Connected World, which is their headline conference. And what we did with them was we took real-time IoT data from simulated vehicles. So in this case, it was a fleet of connected trucks that are driving in a platoon. So these kind of semi-autonomous connected vehicles. And then we used the Clause platform to calculate real-time invoices. So based on the number of miles that these vehicles were driving in a platoon in this kind of formation, the different vehicles would be billed or credited, in real time. So again, you got this kind of a really interesting interplay between the legal contract for the freight companies or the drivers, and then a real-time source of data that you want to send into the contracts. So that second one is really, using connected contracts to build a whole new business model, something that would be almost impossible to build with a traditional contract management sort of a process. So if we had to sort of summarize the platform in a nutshell, you know, as I said in the sort of preamble, it's all about building a platform that where IT and contract managers, in-house counsel or external counsel can collaborate, and we can build, you know, runnable, invocable contracts that are part of our IT landscape, but that are actually legally enforceable. So in my previous company, you know, one of the issues we had was that salespeople would go out and they were negotiating software license agreements, and they'd be really creative about, you know, the structure of those agreements. But when they got back to base, sometimes they would find that the company ERP system couldn't actually support, you know, the creative contract that they'd just sort of invented, you know, over a game of golf. And that's a fairly common problem, right? This gulf between the words in the PDF and the ERP system that is supposed to support the terms of the contract. So the gap between those two worlds creates all the inefficiencies that Peter described earlier on. So that's fundamentally the problem that we're setting out to solve. So just a little bit of terminology here, and kind of let me set the stage for the demo that Matt's going to show you in a minute. So on the left, we see sort of trusted sources of data. You know, these contracts are living, breathing entities within the IT infrastructure. We need to send them data. So in this scenario on the slide, you know, we're processing IoT data from some sort of vehicle fleet, but that's also being correlated with perhaps expense data, GPS data on the position of the vehicles, attendance data for the drivers that are driving, performance data. All of those you know, trusted event sources are being routed to a specific contract. And within that contract, there are what we call smart clauses. So the contract looks very traditional. You know, it's a legal PDF. You could take it to your lawyer or to your, you know, your dispute resolution body, and they would recognize it as a traditional contract. The only difference is that some of the clauses in that contract are these new smart clauses, where not only do they have natural language text, there's executable logic sitting behind the text, so that we can not just sign the PDF, you know, with a digital signature. We can also integrate it into our IT system. And when the contract sees an interesting situation, it can reach out and have side effects on the outside world. So in this scenario, the contract is talking to the accounting system, which is Xero in this case. And when the contract needs to make a payment between the contracting parties, it's using Stripe as the payment mechanism. So that's you know, in a single slide, that's the sort of the high level overview of the platform. And this notion of the smart clause is, you know, Matt will revisit in his demo. And so contracts are fascinating things because they're multi-party, right? I'll never have a contract with myself. There's always somebody on the other end of the contract, and that means that there's an implicit trust relationship, you know, in that business negotiation, and that's really where blockchain comes in. So the Clause platform supports blockchains. You know, we're blockchain neutral in that we integrate with Ethereum, Hyperledger Fabric, Hyperledger Composer, and we're working on integrations with other DLT platforms in the future. But we don't mandate a blockchain. And our feeling here is it's because it's really tied up in the trust relationship between the contracting parties. You could have a contract where neither party wants a trusted intermediary to host all the data and do all the execution. They all want to have all the IoT events in a distributed ledger, so a sort of single source of truth about the state of the contract and the events that have been processed by the contract. Or you could have a very kind of lopsided or one-sided business relationship where actually the smart legal contract is going to execute in one of the contracting parties' data centers, or in the cloud as a fairly traditional software as a service offering. So the clause architecture is designed to support all of these different use cases. So I think before we move on, and Matt is going to show us a very exciting demo of the technology in action. We just were curious to know about your level of knowledge of blockchain and perhaps how important you feel blockchain will be for these kinds of use cases. So Human has just launched the third poll, just to try to get a sense for how much blockchain experience people have got. And that will help us tailor some of the subsequent material and probably some of the subsequent webinars that we'll be doing in the future. So I think...
Well, thanks so much, Jan. Yeah, everybody, just please take a minute here just to indicate your familiarity with blockchain technology, and please feel free to share with us in the comments or the Q&A sort of your interests and any experience you may have already within your own company or practice with implementing or using blockchains to solve specific use cases or problems.
Okay, I think we can probably end it now. And let's share the results. So yeah, most people have a sort of intermediate level of blockchain knowledge. Personally, I think that's great. Clearly it's a thing, right? It's becoming a really disruptive trend in the industry, and I think for legal tech, this ability to have a single source of truth across contracting parties could be really really interesting for many use cases. So thank you for giving us that background information. So I'm now going to hand back to Peter, who's going to tell us a bit more about Clause and the relationship to the Accord project.
Thanks, Dan. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Accord project now. The Accord project was established with the help of Clause last year. The intent of the Accord project is to do two main things. The first is to establish techno-legal standards for smart legal contracts, and an open source middleware layer that embodies those standards. So the Accord project is a non-profit. It works with a variety of organizations, and we're going to touch upon those organizations briefly now. So the Accord project, as I say, has established an open source middleware layer for smart legal contracts. That's composed of four main components: a templating system, a domain-specific language called Ergo for expressing the legal logic that sits behind the natural language prose of smart clauses, a standard execution environment for running those smart clauses within legal contracts, and also a variety of tooling. Dan will touch upon a Microsoft Word add-in later in the webinar. So, as I mentioned, the idea behind the project is that it's collaborative with a variety of other organizations, some technology providers, as Dan mentioned earlier, Hyperledger Fabric, Hyperledger Composer, Ethereum, and Corda. We work with a variety of standards organizations as well. So the IEEE, the International Organization for Standardization as well, and a variety of law firm partners, some of which are displayed on your screen. And there's currently 40 law firms that are involved, and many more that are signing up on a daily basis. So just to touch upon the structure of the project, fairly standardized in the DLT and consortia space, comprises a steering committee that sets down the vision and coordinates the project, an advisory board that comprises law firms and some of those standards organizations that I mentioned, a series of working groups that are split into legal practice areas and also technology, and members and partners that comprise those working groups. Just briefly touch upon the structure of a smart legal contract as envisaged by the Accord project. A smart legal contract is composed of three main elements: the natural language prose that currently exists in legal contracts as we know them today, the executable logic that sits behind the natural language, and a formal model that binds the two together. And that model provides a series of benefits that we'll touch upon in due course, but essentially it enables verification of the execution and validates the editing of that natural language. So I'm going to hand over now to Matt Roberts, our integration lead, who will run you through a demo of smart clauses within a legal contract.
Thanks, Peter. So what I'm going to do to try and bring some of this discussion to life is take you through an exemplar scenario. So like some of the other use cases that Dan talked about, this is a supply chain use case. So what we're going to see is how we can take a supply contract, use some data from an IoT device, and automate the administration behind calculating payments within that contract and the operational processes that exist because of that contract. So that's the flow that we see across the bottom. We'll also build this contract from scratch in the clause platform and see how the contract manager, the person that is drafting and negotiating the terms of that contract, composes these smart clauses and non-computable clauses together into a complete smart legal contract, and how we collaborate with the other parties to that contract by sending out notifications for signing before we can execute that contract. So the demo use case we're going to see is based on fragile goods. So an existing contract concept where we want to determine the price based on shocks that are recorded to a package in transit. Now, these contracts exist, that data exists, but typically this is an offline batch process, and we're going to transform that into a real-time contract using the clause platform. So I'm looking at the clause user interface here as our contract manager, and I'm going to create a new contract. We're going to call this our supply agreement, and I'm going to add some signatories to that agreement. So I'm going to add myself, and I'm going to add Dan. Dan's going to join me today in my contract. So this information will be used to send out those notifications and capture signatories when we execute the contract. So our contract is currently completely blank. And to build the contract, we select from a library of pre-built contract templates. So these templates come from a repository. Many of these are open source, as contributed by members of the Accord project. Others are samples that Clause has provided, and this library can also include your own private templates. So those that are private to your organization, or even to a third party with whom you have a relationship to have access to their template library. So we need to add our non-computable headers to start. So this tells us the participants to the contract. I'm going to just make some small changes here to describe that this is Matt's Supermarket and Dan's Agricultural Corporation. I'm going to add now my smart clause, which is this fragile goods clause here. So we can see in this clause, we have text which captures the bounds, the range within our accelerometer readings from our IoT device are allowed. We have a price for reducing, a penalty for reducing the price for each shock that we encounter, and a total package price. I'm going to reduce this, let's say $400 today, and I'm going to have a late delivery charge of $20. We also, for demonstration purposes, only have 10 seconds to deliver this contract. So we'll see that for live when we run this this contract in a moment. The other interesting thing on the right-hand side, so to help you see what's going on behind the scenes, the Clause platform and actually the Accord project technology is extracting the data from this natural language automatically. So when I was updating these values, let's make that 25 instead, we validate the text and extract the penalty. And that means we can use it when we send data to the contract. We also need another non-computable clause. This one has a date in it that's important to us. So I've composed my contract from my non-computable and my smart clauses. I'm going to save that. And this contract, as well as being hosted on the platform, is available as a PDF. So this should look much like a traditional contract. Those clauses are listed sequentially here with those terms I've created. But also, at the end, we pull out that data that's been extracted. So based on those Accord project templates, the parties, the agreement dates, the price, the penalty, and so on, all of that is collected. And that means that we can use this PDF to send for a digital signature. So we'll do that now. And in just a moment, I should see a request. We're using HelloSign to capture our digital signatures. We'll come back in a moment to take a look at that. There we go, it's just come through. So we can view and sign that contract, and we'll see the same PDF that we just viewed. And at the end, I'm prompted to sign that contract. I won't go through the whole life cycle, but you can see how we would integrate and capture that signature before we execute. Okay, good. So we have our contract, we have a PDF, we have it signed. The next thing to do is to send some data to that contract. Because of those templates which compose the data model, the language, and the logic that Peter described earlier, we can build automatically a web address, a URL to which we can send data. So it's a little difficult for us to show a real shipment happening on the webinar today, but what we're going to use is a mobile phone, a smartphone, to simulate accelerometer readings. We use an accelerometer in a mobile device to send data to the contract, and that will invoke the clauses. So I'm going to bring up my device here. Here we go. So I take this URL here, and we've got the value in this field here. You can see these values on the right-hand side are coming from the accelerometer. And when I click start, the countdown will begin. And depending on when I click finish, if I'm within the time limit or not, and how many out of range readings, we'll get a variable price calculated by the contract. So let's start delivery. Okay, so we've got a couple of shocks there. Trying to drop my phone on the floor. And we'll finish in a moment. There we go, let's finish. And we have 330, so we had a $25 penalty, I think it was, for being late. And for each of those shocks that was outside of our range, we took off an additional $5. So we had quite a few shocks there. So that's all well and good. That's interesting, but that value is not much good on its own. There's logic there that clearly calculates the penalty, but we can do better than that. We can use that value to automate the operational processes associated with this contract, and that's what we're going to do next. In some scenarios, these payments could be executed automatically. We could call out to an online payment gateway like Stripe, which is what we're going to do, and make that payment automatically. We could create a line item in an invoice, so maybe our supply agreements are billed on a monthly basis. Or in a more simple use case, we could simply notify the party to this contract that they need to make a payment and use the traditional process. But that can all be managed by the Clause platform. So I'm going to reopen the contract so I can make a change. And I'm going to add some configuration that connects this contract to Stripe. Now today, this is a slightly technical process. This is work in progress. But essentially what this configuration description does is it tells clause to convert the response that we get from our clause to a Stripe charge. In future, this will be a graphical, a visual interface to make this more straightforward. And it also, through the configuration, says which secrets, which passwords, and customer identifiers do I need to make the payment to the right party. So I'm going to update that configuration. And if I switch back to my mobile device when we run it again, so let's get that going. When I finish the delivery, I'll switch to Stripe and we'll see the payment made. Great, 350, so slightly different value this time, slightly fewer shocks. And switch back to Stripe, we'll refresh. There we go, 350 on the top. So that value was calculated automatically by the contract, and that connection configuration binds it to Stripe to make the payment automatically. So $350 is the value that we saw in the user interface. So that's the demonstration. There are several other demonstrations baked into the platform, and towards the end of this webinar, we'll give you details as to how you can register to sign up for the platform yourself and try those other demonstrations. So let's switch back to our slides.
Great, thank you, Matt. Wow, you know, that's in a few clicks and a few minutes, Matt was able to create one of these new connected contracts, hook it up to an IoT device, process events in real time, and then make a payment. And as he said, that could have been generating an invoice if you didn't want to do automated payments. So it really is that simple. Of course, there was the process of creating the templates, which I'll come on to now. But this is kind of a bit of a game changer for the contract manager. They move out of just dealing with natural language and then sort of throwing that natural language over the wall at the IT guys who then spend 6 months configuring the ERP system or whatever it may be, to a new world where they're much more in control of the operational aspects of the contracts that they're creating. But you've probably seen that, so Clause is in closed beta right now. We're not finished. There's a long list of things that Human and Peter have been feeding the engineering team that are driving our roadmap, and we really want you to get involved in that roadmap process. We're building this product in a very transparent and open way, and we would really love your feedback on the features that you think that you need and our priorities. But just a few things that I wanted to call out, things that we're really starting to work on in the next quarter. So the first one, which is really exciting, that Peter alluded to, is this Microsoft Word add-in, and that addresses two needs really. The first need is it allows somebody with an existing contract inside Microsoft Word to highlight one of the clauses in that contract and sort of essentially say, make that clause smart. So replace the text of that clause, with its smart version. So on the right-hand side in this screenshot, you can see the smart clause library. So essentially the same stuff that Matt just showed you in the web interface, that would also be surfaced inside Microsoft Word. And then the second need is, well, how do these templates come into existence? So if there isn't an existing smart clause template for the thing that they would like to make smart, there's sort of a wizard built into the Word add-in that steps you through converting the text into a smart executable representation. And that's shown on the templates tab in the screenshot. The second thing that we're very passionate about is really providing a best-in-class contract editing experience. So you probably saw that the contract editor that we have today, it's very powerful. It does the parsing of the natural language text. It can pull out the parameters that we need for execution. But we believe we can make the usability of that editor far better, particularly when it comes to some of the multi-user collaboration features that people will need as they agree on the terms of the contract. And then the last bullet, Matt also alluded to, you probably saw the connection configuration. It's incredibly powerful today, feature-wise. We have almost everything we need, but we would like to provide a visual editor so that essentially the contract manager can just sort of visually associate that smart clause with Stripe or with Xero or with Revolut or whatever it is, whatever back-end system they want to integrate with. And we will sort of auto-bind the smart clause to the back-end system. That will, obviously cut down on the learning curve for people that are new to the tool. And then, right? There's a long list of other ideas we have, and of course we'd welcome your feedback. So the last poll, we're very curious to understand, what do you perceive as the obstacles to adopting some of this technology? We're pragmatists, we're realists. We know that there will be obstacles, and we want to address them head on. And through the Accord project, do that in a very open, transparent, and collaborative process. So please, if you've got a moment, vote in the poll, and that will inform us as we evolve the product, and we set priorities within the Accord project.
And thanks again, Matt, for showing us a live demonstration of a real legally enforceable contract connected to external data as well as software systems, and really showing the automation that's possible with smart legal contracts powered by Clause, as well as to Dan to explaining the roadmap with respect to making it quite easy for attorneys and others without a technical background to draft, build smart legal contracts themselves. So we'll just wait a few more seconds and end this poll here and share the results with everybody. It seems like we have a wide variety of answers to the question about what the biggest obstacles are for adopting smart legal contracts or connected contracting, with the winner essentially being concerns about data security and privacy. Other questions about enforceability and dispute resolution that we have got at least one question on, as well as maybe not trusting external data, the ability of computer code to properly capture the legal intent of the parties, as well as issues with being complicated, lacking standards, and perhaps the business bottom line benefits to companies and clients. Those are all certainly topics and obstacles that Clause is really meant to address, as well as the Accord project, specifically when it comes to standards. And as we sort of move forward here, Dan and the rest of the presenters will address these questions head on, as well as in the Q&A as well.
Yeah, thanks, Uman. Yeah, so I think thank you for for sharing your views on the challenges. And many of those challenges are the motivating force behind the Accord project. So things like lack of standards and concerns about data security and privacy are things that we're actively working on within the Accord project technology working group. And that, as I said, that's a very open and transparent process. We'd love to get everyone involved in helping address those challenges. At Clause, we're really excited about the potential of this technology, and I'm really pleased that the lack of clear understanding of benefits came so low in the challenges. Like us, it would appear that you can really see the benefit of moving to this new connected sort of a world, where we do get real-time visibility into the state of a contract, to address Peter's point. And we can build new business models, right, that adjust to things that are happening in the real world in real time. So things like usage-based car insurance, for example, is a new business model that's getting a lot of press at the moment. And we do want the human to remain in the loop, right? So that there's a heavy sort of notification aspect to many of these use cases. The contract can reach out to contract managers and warn them, alert them when certain conditions are likely to occur. And as we said, in some cases, people will want to automate payment, but probably only up to a certain threshold. And then above that threshold, they will require human approval, or fall back to a sort of more traditional 30-day invoicing sort of a scenario. And ultimately, I think for the contracting parties, if there is a dispute, an issue, it'll become a much more factual dispute resolution process. All contracting parties can see the state of the contract, how it evolved. They can see all the data that was processed by the contract. If it's stored on the blockchain, they each have their own trusted, immutable, distributed copy of the data that was processed by the contract. So this should dramatically speed up dispute resolution in many scenarios. And ultimately reduces administration overhead. If you're a large company, you probably employ dozens, or even in some cases hundreds of people that manage contracts. And a lot of that work today is fairly administrative. Lots of email ping pong, lots of Excel spreadsheets being sent around, lots of contract managers waiting on IT to provide feedback on operational aspects, etc., etc. So we strongly believe that we can improve the efficiency of those existing processes. And get involved, right? Get started today. Everything that Matt showed you, you can do yourself. So we have a very nice set of tutorials that are built into the product itself. When you log into the product, on the right-hand side, you'll see a sort of a help tear out. And the tutorials are all available in there. If you have any issues, you can chat to us live, and the team here will be thrilled to help you. So if you would like to have an account on Clause to start using the beta, we'd be thrilled to get your feedback. You can simply click on the link on this slide. And I think Matt is going to put that into the chat for you as well, so you have it. And that will walk you through a very simple web form where you can enter your details, and we'll create you an account. And within 24 hours or less, you will see a sign-up invitation email. So I encourage you to get started today and start to explore the potential of this amazing technology. So I'm going to hand back to Hooman now, who I think is going to help us with some of the questions and answers.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Dan, for that as well. And thanks everyone for being on this call, as well as submitting some questions here. So we have some questions to discuss. One question is showing some examples of the Ergo language. And I'll go ahead and hand it over to Matt to give a bit more explanation about Ergo, as well as where they can find examples of the language and maybe get involved as well in helping to develop the language through the Accord project.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Human. So the Ergo language is being developed in the open as part of the Accord project. So all of the contributions, the planning, the issues, and the code are available publicly on GitHub. So if you go to the Accord project website, accordproject.org, you can find the link to our GitHub repositories, which contain the source code and many examples. There's a folder in there called examples for you to take a look at. The documentation gives a nice overview too, with some examples for your reference.
Excellent. Yeah, so the Ergo language is also the focus, certainly, of the technology working group, specific weekly calls as well. And we're actually really excited to have launched an early version of the Ergo language last week. And you can also go to the website, which we'll put in the chat, ergo.accordproject.org as well. Once again, that's ergo.accordproject.org for those of you interested in learning more and getting involved with the Accord project's domain-specific language for smart legal contracts. And so we have another question here about signatures. And the question is basically, is it based on digital signatures, such as hashing, encrypting the hash, or the image of the physical signature, such as in more traditional electronic signature arrangements? And if it's digital, what is a PKI setup? And if it's not, how is it legally binding? So maybe to discuss a bit more of the technical aspects with respect to the digital signature portion of the Clause platform, we'll turn it over to Dan.
Yeah, thanks, Human. Yeah, so, I mean, I'm not a lawyer, clearly, but I do know that contracts have to be signed to be legally enforceable. I'm just looking at Human, who's nodding, our professor of law here. And the reality is that most large enterprises have a digital signature platform. So DocuSign is the gorilla in that space. You probably saw that they recently went public, but there are others. So what Matt demonstrated was an integration between Clause and HelloSign. So what we're doing is we're digitally signing the PDF of the contract using a fairly traditional digital signature workflow. And the reason that's important is obviously if there's a dispute related to the contract, you need that quote unquote wet signature to take in front of the dispute resolution body. Now, to address the sort of the execution aspect of that, we do also hash the content of the template that was used in the smart clause. So there is complete traceability from the digitally signed PDF to the hash of the executable logic that's going to be used at runtime, so that you can be sure that if the person has signed the PDF of smart clause version X.Y, somebody can't come along after the fact and modify the logic of smart clause version X.Y.
Thanks, Dan. And certainly there's a wide variety of approaches that the law considers to be sufficient for a signature to be legally binding, whether it's hash and encrypted or a more traditional electronic signature approach as well. We do have a question in the general chat about a version of the contract being in the Clause technology and deployed to the blockchain. As I understand that question, it seems to be about versioning different, or how do you manage different versions of a contract, and whether perhaps one version or the final version that's considered to be operative interacts with or maybe is stored with the blockchain.
Yeah, that was from Carl Keller, I believe. So great question. If you look in the docs, you'll see there's a sort of an FAQ entry on what does it mean to integrate with blockchain. And there are probably 4 different scenarios that are of interest. The first scenario is the contracts are executing off-chain, maybe for privacy or confidentiality reasons, but they're interested in data that's coming from the blockchain. and perhaps they need to publish data back onto a blockchain. So a simple example would be, it's some sort of an asset transfer contract, and we want to record the transfer of the asset onto a blockchain, but we don't necessarily want all the contractual terms to be exposed to the blockchain. There are other scenarios where you do actually want to execute the logic of the smart clause on the blockchain platform, and that's because the contracting parties, they don't want an intermediary running that logic. They all want to run the logic themselves. So we support a variety of these different use cases. They're described in the documentation, and we've got a couple of tutorials that describe a couple of the use cases. So one of the tutorials moves Ether, for example, from one Ethereum account to another based on a smart legal contract. And then we have a more IoT-centric use case where all the IoT events for a smart legal contract are being stored on the blockchain. And then the smart legal contract is executing based on those IoT events.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dan. It seems like we're nearing the top of the hour, and unfortunately the end of our webinar here. We may have a minute or two for one or two more questions if they happen to come through the chat or through the Q&A. Will there be a replay? Yes. This webinar will be recorded and posted to the website, as well as, just to indicate again, on the first Tuesday of every month, we will be doing a webinar as well. So we encourage you to certainly join us every month, as well as to share the webinars and the signups with your colleagues that may be interested.
I thought the question was amusing. Where are we located? Because of all the honking near us. So apologies for that if you heard some noise, sirens, etc. We're based in beautiful Manhattan, New York. So hence the street noise and the sirens. But, it's a beautiful day here in New York. The sun is shining. It feels like springtime. So we're blessed.
Okay, we have one more question from Philip Andrew relating to representing and managing rights management or digital rights management, including intellectual property rights, buying and selling contracts in the blockchain. Certainly, Clause is a very flexible and modular platform that can deal with contracts, including intellectual property. In the Accord project, we indeed have a specific intellectual property working group that deals with just these types of contracts with respect to automating the purchase, sale, and management of digital rights, intellectual property, licenses of a wide variety, as well as how they may integrate with blockchain or not. Well, great. So once again, we would like to thank you all for joining our webinar. We look forward to additional interactions through Clause or the Accord project, as well as joining us next month as well. And we look forward to having you next time. Once again, this is Human Shadab, so on behalf of Clause and our colleagues here, thanking you again for joining, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you very much.